It's member-supported Hawaii Public Radio, all things considered, and I'm Dave Lawrence. Real thrill. Always been a big guitar fan. In Honolulu this week, we are honored we have a very special guitar player who is in the area, and you got a good view on this gentleman. It's Lee Ritenour. He's at the Blue Note Hawaii all the way through Sunday. He's doing 2 shows a night, and a real pleasure to have him joining us here on All Things Considered. Hey, hey Lee, how are you?
Thank you. Very nice to be here in Honolulu.
And when we get into your life, I think of you as guitar from the time you were a teenager. There's some incredible stories. Before we hear some of those earliest stories, how did you very first end up gravitating towards the guitar?
Well, that was a long time ago, and I started when I was 8 years old, and it was in Los Angeles, and it was a great period for the guitar. You know, there was guitar heroes everywhere. First of all, the guitar was all over TV. It was rock and roll was coming strong. You know, it was jazz and blues and country and acoustic music. You know, all the acoustic guitar going on at that time. So it was easy for me to get excited about the guitar in those early days.
And you ended up, it's like 16 years old, mamas and the papas. I mean, not a lot of people at 16 can have any kind of professional experience that decades later is still part of their resume. How did you end up getting that?
Well, it was a great time to be an up-and-coming musician because it was before computers, before DJs, before all this stuff, right? And so you needed live musicians for everything, for casuals, for parties, for weddings, for bar mitzvahs, for demos, for sessions, for everything. And I met so many professional musicians. I met all the guys from Toto on the Queen Mary playing a casual. I met Dave Grusin when I was 19, the great pianist composer. I met Patrice Rushen when she was 14. You know, there was a whole bunch of us coming up at the time, and I finally joined a band. At the time, they wanted to cross over rock and jazz, and I was into that, and I was about 15 or 16, and somehow they got connected with John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, and he was going to produce our demo, which he did, and we went up to his house in Bel Air, in this big estate in Los Angeles and outside of Beverly Hills, and he had a studio upstairs, which impressed me greatly when I was a teenager, and later I had my home studio because of probably that inspiration. And then the band and the demo didn't go anywhere, but he asked me to stay and for another night and record some tracks with some other up-and-coming studio musicians and the guys that Leland Sklar, a very infamous studio player that was probably about 19 at the time, and a great drummer named Ed Green who did all the Barry White sessions and the Motown sessions back in those days. And he was very young, and all of a sudden I was 16 recording with the Mamas Papa. Later I found out that John Phillips recorded constantly, and to this day, I never know if that track came out. I looked for it, and I gave up after years, and but it's on the resume, and I did work with them, and it was a great experience. And I started doing sessions with Sergio Mendes when I was 18 or 19, and worked with Peggy Lee and Lena Horne and all those kind of people back in those early days. And finally, I met my buddy Dave Grusin, and he was the big film composer in L.A. And after that, that's when the studio career took off.
How did you get onto the wall? I mean, run like hell. It's just, I know they were bringing in a lot of different people to augment Snowy White. That was one of the guys. I mean, they had a lot of different cats. How did you get on that?
Well, Bob Ezrin was a great producer of Pink Floyd in those days, and I had worked with him on a couple other sessions, and great guy. And he just called me up one day and he said, hey, we need some additional guitar on the stuff with Pink Floyd on the wall. And of course, I don't know if it was called The Wall at that point, but wow. They had been working on the album for already 2 years. And I remember going down to the studio, and I came in with this huge crate of guitars and a huge pedal board and a bunch of amps, and I thought I was going to impress these guys. And then I walk in, and Gilmore had the studio just lined with, like, I don't know, 50 guitars of every great vintage, and but they were so sweet, and we had a great time. I think I worked for a couple of days and played acoustic guitar. And the funny story, in those days it was still vinyl, right? And CDs weren't around yet. And they said, Lee, I don't think, if it's okay, we're still trying to keep it like a band name, a band sound. So there's a few, studio guys like yourself that we invited to play on the record, but we may not put your name on the record. Is that okay? And I said, am I going to get paid? And I said, oh, yes, very well. I said, well, that's cool then. And then later, when the CD came out, they put everybody's name out.
Yeah, every band has those kind of things. I remember that Sabbath had a keyboardist off the side of the stage. Stuff like that is always a little goofy.
The Beatles, right?
Say again?
The Beatles, right?
Right, yeah, a lot. Exactly, the Beatles with Billy. I mean, a lot of...
I was around on some of those dates at the record plant when, some of the other musicians were sneaking in on some of the Beatles sessions.
And you were there?
Well, I was around the corner at another room, yeah.
That's when you think about working, all the different artists that you've gotten to work with, you've been honored with so many different cats too. You're constantly this ongoing, I would say, journey of guitar that you've been on. Are there a particular session that brings back, or sessions that have a certain element of pride that kind of have an all-out career resonance?
Well, of course, I've been lucky enough I started my own career 40 years ago, believe it or not. And I was 12 when I got my recording contract. No. And, but to have a major record contract, which I have had for 40 years, and do over 40 albums, that in itself for me is a big achievement, because it's kind of a crazy journey, the music business, so you never know. And I kind of keep pushing myself to try new music and stay fresh and challenge myself and keep loving music, because I know a lot of other guys that have been in it for a long time, they don't love it as much as they did when they were young, and I still do. So for me, that's the greatest gift. But some of my own records, certain sessions, certain albums were super, super special. When I did, just a few years ago, the Six String Theory record, where I had all these amazing legendary guitar players, and I got to hang with all these cats, and
BB among them.
BB, of course, George Benson, Slash, Steve Lukather, Joe Bonamassa. Neil Schon. Yeah, Neil Schon, yeah. So great fun doing that record. Working with Quincy Jones on the early Michael records, and the Brothers Johnson and Quincy's own records, and my buddy Dave Grusin do those big film scores, and Pink Floyd, of course, Steely Dan, a lot of fun records. And there was a lot of cat food commercials too.
Hey, like you said, it'll pay the bills. Sometimes it's not all about the credit. Michael, any interesting run-ins with him? He's such a talented guy, huh? He could just sing a couple notes, you get kind of a chill.
Oh my God! Well, I didn't. By that time, Michael was doing his big records with Quincy. I was onto my solo career, so I didn't work on those records. But when I did work with him, was when he just started out, when he was 12 or 13, with the brothers, with Jermaine and the guys. And also I worked on Whitney's first demos and on the first record. So I saw Whitney come in as maybe she was 19 or something, and just singing like an angel. And same with Michael. He was 12 or 13, and it was crazy,
I bet watching that, you could just see the talent at that young age.
Yeah.
Oozing out of people. Very generous with your time. He's an amazing musician. He's been with us for decades, giving us great music. Latest one, A Twist of Rit. And real pleasure getting to talk to you. I hope that the rest of your stay in Honolulu goes well. And thanks for taking some time for HPR.
My pleasure. And everybody should come and check out this new beautiful club, the Blue Note. You guys are lucky to have it. Keep it alive and keep the music happening here in Hawaii.
We appreciate getting to talk to you, and we hope we get to see you again, Lee. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you.